Okay, everyone, welcome back to another episode. As always, if you like what you hear, please do share, give us a like, consider subscribing on SoundCloud, iTunes, or Spotify. Always much appreciated. So today, I'm sat down with Rachel Clay, who has an extensive background in PR and now heads up the influencer marketing at London agency Matter of Form. Hi, Rachel.
Hello.
How are you doing on this rainy, grey, miserable day in London?
Good. I have to say the weather is not doing much for my mood, but no, I'm okay. I can't complain.
Or just to start on a positive.
I try to.
So we're going to be talking about influencer marketing.
Of course.
Just to start off with, what's it all about? Give me the high level view. What do you do? What's influencer marketing all about in 2019?
Okay, so influencer marketing in a nutshell is working with people who are influential on social media to promote a brand, a product, a service, a key message, a campaign, whatever it might be. And when we say influential, that could either be in terms of audience size or more commonly now, and a more sophisticated approach, it's about the level of engagement that person has with their audience, even if the audience is much smaller.
Okay. And I guess one of my observations of influencer marketing is that now when you say influencer marketing, everyone thinks of Instagram.
Yes.
But actually, when you get to the bones of it, we're getting people with influence to talk about, shout about, and help to promote our product and service, which to me has been happening for quite a long time, but just through other channels. Is that a fair statement? Or
yeah, absolutely, and that's what we say when we're sort of educating our clients and the people that we work with, that actually the term influencer marketing is a bit misleading. People think it's very specific, and it literally applies to working on social networks. So Instagram is the main focus, but also YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, increasingly TikTok, and Snapchat. But actually, the marketing industry has only ever existed to influence people. So if you go right back to the beginning of time, I think the first examples of influencer marketing that I have heard of date back to the 1700s, when Wedgwood actually used to gift their new designs to royal families around the world.
Quite a long time before Instagram was
about. A very long time before Instagram was about. But yeah, he would gift his new designs to royal families around the world in the hope that they would then showcase them and share them with other notable families and people that they're inviting over to dinner, and they would therefore be influenced to buy the same things.
Amazing. And so I guess this is where your background in PR kicks in, because essentially is PR, right? Or am I wrong?
Actually, I would disagree with that.
Okay, please do.
I would say, so there's 2 points to this. As I say, influence is the point of marketing. But up until the 2000s, when you had the internet launch and we had blogs and now we have social media, marketers have adjusted their strategies and their approaches to take these new platforms into account. So influence, yes, has always been the same, and in that respect does fit within PR, marketing, communications. However, I would say if you want to have a very sophisticated and strategic approach to your influencer marketing now, and you consider all of the changes that have been made to Instagram, the way that people consume entertainment and content, and we'll come on to talk about that more later, I think. It actually is a discipline that doesn't sit alongside PR, or shouldn't sit alongside PR. I think it's much better suited to sit alongside e-commerce and act actually as what we call a social SEO strategy.
Interesting.
So how you work with other profiles on Instagram is how you're going to beat the Instagram algorithm, for example. Keep your content high in people's feeds.
Okay, got you. And do you think that algorithm is why influencer marketing has become so synonymous with Instagram, or why as a discipline it seems to have exploded with Instagram? Why Instagram? Why is that such a great fit?
I believe that Instagram is following the blueprint of WeChat in China. Okay. So I don't know if you're familiar with it. Yes.
Yeah, I have it on my phone.
Oh, that's very impressive.
I think I have one friend.
Okay, well, it's a start. But for those who maybe aren't as familiar, WeChat in China is one of the leading social networks there.
Yep.
And it has evolved to become almost like an ecosystem. So it is not only your social network and your search engine, it is your messaging system, and it is, for many brands, the biggest e-commerce platform that they have in the market.
Yeah.
And it facilitates one-click shopping. So with WePay, you can click on an item that you'd like to buy, directly linked to a Chinese bank account, you purchase it within a second. It also facilitates social commerce. So if you purchase something, you message somebody else within the app, because we never leave the app, we live our whole lives in it, you are then given a discount on a future purchase. So
it's amazing, isn't it?
yes, this whole conversational commerce, this whole social commerce kind of initiative is very strong within China and very successful. And I believe that Instagram, as far as they can in the Western world, with all the kind of the legislation and the regulations that exist here, are following that roadmap.
Got you.
So Instagram, they are trying to grow out to become, say, more than a social network. Arguably it is already. More than a search engine. Arguably it is already. We educate our clients here that actually their Instagram profile is their new website.
Got you.
Which, at a traditional web design and e-commerce agency, is a little controversial, but we believe it's true.
And how many brands are now, so startup e-commerce brands, how many brands are you seeing that are, I guess, Instagram first? So they are genuinely
social first.
going social first, but Instagram is going to be our primary focus, and then our e-commerce store and other channels and platforms come as a secondary measure. Like, are you seeing that as a trend emerge?
Yes. So some of the most successful brands that you'll see today, so the big brands that everyone would know, the Glossiers exactly of the world, are social first brands. So they not only use social media as an e-commerce platform, as far as they can, obviously, with the exception of the trial that is being run in the States currently. It is not yet possible to complete a sale within the Instagram platform. So they're still working through their checkout process. So you still, for the time being, do need a website to be able to complete a transaction online. But as soon as that changes, there will be a huge shift in the e-commerce industry. And it's already predicted that by, I think it's 2021, e-commerce within Instagram will be worth several $1 billion.
That's insane, isn't it?
For the time being, I think we have to take the time frame and the estimate with a pinch of salt, because we don't know. But the point being that there will be a seismic shift in the way people shop, and in the way that people expect to be able to complete a purchase.
And how do you see other platforms coming in on that? So you mentioned Snapchat, TikTok, YouTube. Are other platforms catching up with that, or do you see kind of Instagram being kind of in our market anyway, being at the forefront of that push?
Yes. Personally, yes. I do believe that Instagram, I say, is following the sort of the WeChat roadmap and will become the main destination and an ecosystem that everyone is encouraged to live their life within. You see it already. It was announced earlier this year that Facebook were merging all of their messaging systems. So WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, Instagram Messenger, they're already trying to create one destination that you never have to leave. So no, and for sure, I educate all of our clients that their Instagram profile is the new website for their brand, because it is the first touch point between their consumer and follower in many cases now.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Like, so much of if I'm researching something, like a product or a destination, Instagram's such a great place to start that process.
Well, exactly. But several years ago, you'd have probably Googled it and gone straight to the website.
Precisely.
Now you use Instagram as a search engine. You search what you need and you go straight to the profile page.
Yeah, so I can totally see it. And how receptive I guess it changes, doesn't it, in terms of people's experience, but when a new client contacts you, like, what's their perception of Instagram? How much education is still, influencer marketing, already just saying Instagram, aren't we? But what's their perception of influencer marketing as a channel, and how much education is needed to get them into the right headspace before you start?
It varies. So we do a lot of work within the beauty sector. So some of our clients are Smashbox, for example, or the Estée Lauder designer fragrance division. We run all of their fragrance campaigns. Beauty actually as an industry is quite advanced within the influencer space. So they arguably were sort of pioneers at the beginning of it and drove it forward with sort of how-to videos and, you know, different looks that beauty artists created on YouTube. So there was a little more education, but one of the biggest challenges within the industry is the level of understanding and awareness.
Yeah.
A lot of people think influencer marketing and they think, oh, well, influencers are just people that have been on Love Island.
Yeah.
Or influencers are people that just buy their followers, turn up at parties and charge a fortune. There's a lot of negative press around influencer marketing.
I was going to say, have you seen that have an impact? Because
Yes.
it's probably been a big, it's been a big thing over the last, say, 6-12 months, right? It's almost like the negative press around influencer marketing.
Yeah.
And is that making your life harder?
It is in some respect. Yes, it is, because of two reasons. One, because the influencer industry evolved so quickly that there was already such a lack of knowledge and experience. So, you know, nobody to date, as far as I'm aware, has done a degree in influencer marketing. There are now training courses available, and every 8 weeks we do a one-day masterclass, but they're few and far between.
Yep.
And I think there was a report out last year that estimated there are only 200 people in the world that had more than something like 3 to 4 years experience of dedicated influencer marketing sort of industry knowledge. So there is still such a need for accurate understanding, for education, for quality experience. So if you consider that there was that deficit to start with, if you overlay that, which the media did, the traditional media did, with a lot of negative headlines,
Yes.
it just really muddies the water. So headlines around the fact that influencers aren't declaring posts in line with regulations, headlines around the fact that influencers are buying followers, headlines around the fact that influencers are unprofessional and overinflate their prices. All of these things give it a very negative,
but I guess
create a very negative perception.
Yeah, and what are the regulations that are in place now that a brand has to consider? How complicated or straightforward is it?
In very simple terms, if you are paying somebody to create content for you and you have editorial control over that content, i.e. you have approval, or you provide them with a brief which outlines the key messaging, the product that has to be included, whatever it may be, that person, in simplistic terms, just has to include #ad.
Okay, yeah.
And it has to be #ad as the first word of the caption. It has to appear above the fold.
Right.
To actually comply. If you have to click into the caption to be able to see it, again, it is argued that if you're just scrolling through, you would not be aware.
So it can't be hidden within a cluster of hashtags?
No, and it can't be at the end of a long caption. And technically speaking, it can't be without the hashtag either. You can't just have the word ad.
That makes complete sense, and that sounds to me relatively straightforward. In reality, like is that something that everyone's on board with, or do you have to manage that?
Increasingly on both sides, so both influencers and brands are becoming more comfortable with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think initially there was a little hostility, particularly on a brand side. People thought that if all of their influencers really had to overtly declare the amount of posts that they were being sponsored to create, that their audience would be turned off from that.
Yeah. Do you see any difference in engagement between an ad where you've declared a relationship versus?
No, actually no, because I think people were naive to think that the Instagram audience weren't already aware.
So, great point. Yeah,
so
great
no,
point.
I think you don't really underestimate your audience. They know that, this influencer doesn't love this perfume and this shampoo or whatever else it might be necessarily.
Yeah.
And the other thing I think to keep in mind is that actually if you are still adding value with your content, so if it is engaging, if it is creative, if it is storytelling, if it is educational or entertaining or inspirational, people will still enjoy consuming it. And the greatest kind of comparison and example that I give is the John Lewis Christmas advert. So
Yep.
every year, everybody looks forward to the John Lewis Christmas advert. Everyone knows it's an advert, but it doesn't mean they don't want to see it.
Yep, and
Because
people love it.
People love it.
People
People
love
will love influencer content if it is well created.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I guess that almost comes on the people buy followers and just charge a fortune and inflate prices. I'm
things aren't
guessing
true.
it's almost irrelevant because if you said earlier, it's all about the engagement, and that person still has to be able to influence an action, i.e. convince someone to come and look at your brand, or if the followers are just purchased, that's never going to happen, right?
Yes. So the first thing I would say about influencers reportedly buying followers is, yes, it does happen. I can't deny that it does, but it happens in the minority of cases, not the majority.
Yeah.
If it is something that you as a brand are concerned about, it is very easy to be able to tell and analyze an influencer's audience to understand whether they've done that.
Yep.
The second thing to understand is that if they have done it, in many cases, it was several years ago, and it was back at a time when the industry was even less understood than it is now. And engagement rate was not the focus, it was audience size. People thought if you had 1 million followers, they wanted to work with you because their product was therefore going to be seen by 1 million people, which was never the case. It never worked that way. So influencers felt at the time that to be able to get work, to be able to compete and be seen as successful, they had to do this. I'm not saying that that was right, but that was the thinking at the time. So if you're working with an influencer now who 5 years ago bought 100,000 followers, you sort of have to consider if it's still an issue today. If you're worried about the engagement that they might achieve with that following, again, it's very easy to be able to analyse the engagement rate. And you also can analyse now something called engagement on reach, which will give you an understanding of the actual engagement that they have achieved, because as well as being able to buy followers, you can buy engagement.
Right, got you. So it sounds like to me there's just then a responsibility on the profession to be able to have an understanding of the right data points, to be able to just do the due diligence before selecting partners to work with.
Yeah, I think it goes back to education. It's about brands and agencies and those responsible for running campaigns being able to understand what is important and the data that they need to be able to analyse.
Yeah.
There is still an issue around professionalism, actually on both sides. So there are influencers that still behave unprofessionally, but equally there are still brands that don't treat them well.
Yeah.
So there is a learning on both sides, but I think as soon as those two things progress, which will only happen over time, then we will all be in a better position.
Excellent stuff. And one of the, I guess, following on from that quite nicely, was one of the questions I had was, what's your process for selecting people to work with? Where do you start? How do you start to kind of put a price on things? How do you understand what to pay, what not to pay? Who's going to work for a particular brand? Who's not going to work for a particular brand? Where do you even begin?
Okay.
And I'm sure it's not as simple as a quick answer within 5 minutes, but...
No, so the first thing to say is at Matter of Form, we are not a talent management agency. We don't talent manage anybody.
Right.
We are a creative agency, which therefore means that we are free to work with the right talent for each of our clients, for each of their budgets, each of their objectives, whatever it may be. So that is the first point to make clear. So given that we are totally agnostic, we always start with a clean slate. The first thing that you should always do is develop your strategy. So develop your creative, understand the objective that you're trying to reach with your campaign. If it's brand awareness, it's going to be a different strategy to if it's more commercially focused. Understand the target market and audience that you're trying to reach, because you need to be able to match that to the demographics of each of the influencers in your campaign. So once you have your strategy clear and your objectives, and you must do that, the worst thing you can do is think of the influencers you want to work with first and then develop your strategy second.
I bet so many people do that though, right?
So many people do, but it's really not the way that we would recommend that you work. So once you have your strategy clear, then you need to think about how to find your talent. The bad news is there is no quick fix. Really what it depends on is a lot of research. So there are hundreds and hundreds of tools out there. that will help you understand the analytics of each of the profiles you're interested in, that will help you create shortlists if you need to find women in London aged between 25 and 35 with a predominant female audience with an interest in beauty, whatever it might be, with an engagement rate of more than 3%, whatever it might be. You can be very specific with your criteria now. There are 100 tools out there, and there are more launched every day that will be able to generate a shortlist, but all have pros and cons. So really don't rely on one because you are limiting yourself.
Yeah.
Do a lot of manual research. Do a lot of research on Instagram.
So would you use a tool to give you a starting point? So, maybe use a couple of tools, search around, get a starting point.
Yeah, I mean, I should also say we've been doing this a long time, so we have a lot of our own relationships too, and a lot of knowledge of the different European markets and the profiles that might work. But yes, get a starting point.
But then you have to get into the detail manually. In yourself and
Top tip is to, as far as you can, follow anybody you're interested in working with for a month, because then you'll get a really good understanding of the type of content that they post, the consistency, the quality, the key themes and the messages, how engaged their audience actually are at this current time, the sentiment of the comments and things underneath. So that's a really good place to start if you can. And once you have your shortlist, you really need to go through a 3-step process. So the first is to understand the data. Your approach has to be data-led. There is no point working with somebody whose predominant audience is in the US if you're targeting the UK. And there are no geographical boundaries online. It much more comes down to language. So if you're posting in English, anybody English speaking around the world might be interested in following that account.
Yep.
So you need to understand where the audience is located. Again, if you want to target a female audience, you need to understand whether more than 50% of these people's audience is female or male. So make sure that you've done your due diligence across the data. Make sure you understand the engagement rate. An engagement rate of about 2% now is what you need to organically reach approximately 20% of that person's audience.
Got you. So that's your line in the sand. If they're above that, you'll continue looking. If they're below that,
yes, it is currently, but that industry standard changes. So it used to be about 1.2% would get you 20% visibility.
And is that the same across different sectors? Because we've already mentioned beauty. Would you expect the same engagement rate for beauty as you would for travel?
Yeah, so it's not so much about the sectors, it's more about the size of the profile. So because it works on a ratio, so micro-influencers, and a micro-influencer we would consider has between about 5 and 70,000 followers on Instagram.
But they are properly into one niche topic.
Yeah,
they
exactly.
Specialise.
Exactly. So they would normally have quite a niche audience, quite a specialist topic area that they are covering, and that audience will be much more highly engaged because of those factors, but also because the engagement rate is a ratio. So if you've got 30,000 followers, it's much easier for 2 to 3% of those to be engaged in your content than if you've got 300,000 followers.
Got you.
So that's sort of where the engagement rate starts to differentiate. So you have nano influencers sort of around the 1,000 follower mark, then micro influencers sort of 5,000 to 70,000, mid tier from there up to about 300,000, and then your top tier and your celebrity influencers that would follow on after that.
Got you. That makes sense.
The engagement rate is super important because that is how Instagram determine what content is popular, i.e. the content that they are going to push out in their feed and is going to be rewarded by the algorithm. So say if the profiles that you're looking at have about a 2% or above engagement rate, you can estimate that you will reach organically about 20% of their audience. But I have to say that is a more generous industry estimate. So Instagram will never release the details of their algorithm, so you will never know exactly how many people that you'll reach with that engagement rate, but it is estimated to be between 10% and 20%. But if the engagement rate starts to increase and it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7%, then you start to obviously reach 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and eventually you'll go out onto the Discover tab and reach a new audience.
Got you. Okay.
But that's why you have to pay particular attention to the engagement rate. It is possible to reach more people by working with a smaller profile with a stronger engagement rate than working with a larger profile with a lower engagement rate.
Yeah, and I guess you mentioned kind of like nano influencers, micro influencers, people that really specialize in a topic. I'm guessing they're what they say. What you're offering is really in that zone, it's probably going to carry more weight than someone broader, perhaps.
Yeah, no, for sure. They have a lot more credibility, and this is why it's so important to develop out your strategy first.
So this is all part of that first phase, is are we going to go for, specialists? Are we going to go broader for brand awareness? Is that kind of where you start to think about those?
Yeah, so a good example. So we run influencer marketing campaigns for Breitling, the watch brand.
Yes.
Breitling wanted to increase their brand association with the sea world. So they're very well known within the aviation industry for their pilots' watches and instruments, but they also have ranges of diving watches. So we devised a campaign for them working with surfers. So we put together a squad of UK surfers with presence on Instagram. So these people are actual professional surfers. They're all award-winning. Forgive me. And we built out a surf squad this summer of these micro-influencer profiles. So we developed the strategy first, which informed then, therefore, the criteria for the profiles that we were looking to identify. And from there, we looked at the data and understood, okay, they've maybe only got 26,000, 30,000, 50,000 followers each, but they are specialised, they are authentic. The word is so overused, but they are authentic within the space. They are going to carry the message and create the association that we need. And they had the statistics to support their place within the campaign.
Excellent example. Yeah, brilliant. And I guess towards the end of the campaign, how are you tracking? So that's a huge amount of work to put that together. Very kind of focused in terms of its goal. How do you then track the success in terms of sales, reach, traffic? Is there anything you're particularly focused on?
So because this was more a brand awareness campaign, so again, we look at the engagement rate of the campaign. So what did it achieve overall? Because that directly impacts the visibility, the reach, the impressions that were generated. But it is no longer enough to just look at the engagement rate and say, it was 4.5%. It was amazing. Because why was it 4.5%? You then have to look at the sentiment. Why did people engage with those posts? What did they say? What were the messages that the influencers received? You have to look at all of those things. Then you have to look at the kind of any trackable links. So there were swipe up links and different things that we included. So you then look at the results of those two to give you a full picture.
Yep. Okay. Excellent stuff. And I think to wrap up, what I'd be really keen to kind of understand is if someone wanted to get into this as a career, or start to kind of explore the topic, where should they go and look? Like, are there any good resources online that you would recommend reading?
Yeah, for brands who wanted to know more.
Brands or even practitioners. Like, are there any great online resources or people you would recommend following?
There are, and there are an increasing amount actually. So there's a couple of newsletters you could sign up to. So Talking Influence is one.
Okay.
Influence Weekly is another. One of my top tips is actually to follow Instagram on Instagram.
Okay.
So Instagram have their own account. And the changes that they make to the algorithm that they want you to know about, the new features that they launch, they create sort of little how-to videos and little tools and explanations. So that is one of my best tips to stay on top of it.
I'm going to go and do that.
Do it. They all, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, they've all got Instagram accounts. So I definitely recommend doing that. And then just play around with it, actually use it. And don't be afraid to take a few risks and see what works and what doesn't.
Fantastic. Great stuff. Look, thank you so much. That was a really interesting chat. And thank you.
Thank you.